Okay, first we've got to just cut all the parts off we need to do the assembly with. Just take off the parts you're going to be actually using, and we've got to clean those up, and I'll show you that next. Right, next thing is to clean up the parts, the mould line and the nubs where they come off the tree. Also use a nail file. One of the cardboard ones are quite cheap. If you're just starting out in the hobby, that's the best thing to use. Later on you can get some skinny sticks or proper sanders and polishers. They can all come later. But for now, a nail file will do the job nicely. It's always good to keep them in your box anyway. They're a very useful tool. I'm using a skinny stick here to clean up this. I'm going to use both of them. So I'll do one with the skinny stick, and we're just checking the nub and seeing if it's nice and flush. It doesn't take much. And I'll use the nail file to take off the mould line all the way along. You put it flat on your bench, you can do with this particular part, and just give it a run along, and you'll find it soon comes off very easily. Do this all round each part and they should fit together fine. There is some parts you can't really clean that well. Small parts where you can barely hold them in your fingers. So the best way for doing that is liquid cement, and I'll show you that method in a bit. Right, we'll just finish the sanding off, and then we'll check the parts, dry fit them together and make sure they actually fit, which is another time you can check this. If there's no gaps in it, you've got a nice fit to it, you start to glue it. I use plastic weld myself, liquid poly, Tamiya, ultra thin or anything like that will be suitable to do the job with. It does a great job. You could use a tube cement and use a cocktail stick. If you put it on a small piece of plastic or plastic bag with a tube and then use a cocktail stick to apply it, you'll find it a lot better, and you won't get so much glue squirting out all over the place. Here I'm using my liquid poly with a normal brush, and I just have to run it down the sides, as you can see here, back up from the other end, and just put an extra piece down the middle bit, and that will do the job nicely. I could check that, and I'll just push it in, make sure it's all in the correct position. I've got a little bit of working time with this. It does grab it very fast, so as you can see here, I'm just doing little adjustments just to make sure it's absolutely perfectly seated, and I'm going to stick some extra bits in here just to make sure about that joint. I always put a little bit more than I should do, but I want to make sure that that's in the right place and it's going to stay there. Right, we do that for the rest of the build. It's basically the same thing over and over again. Clean the part, check it, then glue it, and that's all you have to really do. Take it easy, don't rush it. There's no rush for these. Sometimes you'll see people say, oh, I built this in half an hour. Yeah, right. Have a look at the model they built in half an hour and see point out all the errors they've done on it. You know, they haven't sanded back the pin marks, so when they put the part on there, it's actually sticking out further than it should do. Later on in this, you'll see that I've actually sand off the pin marks from the back of the armour that goes on the turret, because it made it stick out further, and I've seen lots of these with big gaps in the armour of the turret on the top, and there shouldn't be. There should be a little gap, but not a huge great chasm as I've seen on others. So let's get on with the rest of the build. Right, now, whilst the part is still wet, or not hardened off, I'm just checking the bottom hole with the top hole decking to make sure everything is aligned and there's no problems. I've just seen one little problem, and I'm just going to fix that by giving a little push on the side of the bottom hull, and I can try it again to make sure it actually fits. And once I'm satisfied, I'll leave that to dry. I have one more part to fit, and it's the back transom end of the hull, and I've sanded it down. I'm just gluing it in now, and this part will be ready to go to the paint booth and be sprayed up, but we'll leave it to dry for a little while before I do that, and we'll get on with the next piece. Right, now we're going to start the painting. I've let the hull dry. I've got some bits and pieces here to go over. There's the hull top end. I've been putting some small pieces on there, and I actually found one of the small pieces had a small sink mark in it, so I filled it and sanded it off. So that's ready for a bit of painting. The bottom hull, we've got to paint the side of the hull, both sides, and the rear end we've got to do, because there's a piece that goes across here, which is this bit. It goes on here, and you won't be able to get into the back of it, so we'll paint that inside as well. And I use a lolly stick with some white tack. Now the white tack is a non-oil version of the blue tack. Blue tack leaves an oily residue. You don't really want to use it. And these other parts I'm going to be using, that's the stack. I'm going to paint the inside of it now, put it together. Whether I use it or not, I don't know. Right, now it's time for some painting. I've just checked the airflow on my airbrush, and it seems to be working fine, so I'm just spraying the parts up now. I'm using Harden's Steenback airbrush, and it's one I've finally got round to saving up enough money for to get a decent airbrush. But you don't have to have one. You can hand paint them, as long as you make sure you brush out the marks of the brush itself, get a nice smooth finish to it. You should be fine. The other thing you could do is you can get one of these £10 airbrushes from Badger or markets, or even Amazon sell them. You can use that with an old car tyre. You take that car tyre down to the garage and get it filled up with air, and you come back and you can fix your airbrush to it, and that will last you a great deal of time, and it's cheaper than going out and buying the cans of air, although you can buy those if you wish, if you don't fancy having an old tyre under your bench for airbrushing. The Badger airbrushes are not as fine as a double action version that I'm using here, but they do a very good job. You can have a look at one of my old videos, the F18, and you'll see that I've been using that Badger airbrush with that one, and it's only a 144th scale aircraft. You can control it a good deal, just a bit of practice, and the paint goes on lovely. Here you can see I'm just doing the underside of the upper hull. Again, this is places where I can't get to afterwards, or it's very hard to get to, so I put a coat of paint on them so I know they're covered, and if I miss a little spot it doesn't matter because they're already covered. Right, we'll finish off all the spraying like that. I'm just checking the airbrush again, cleaning the nozzle off. Just make sure your nozzle's clean. Sometimes you'll get a build up of paint on it, and when you do it, it will actually spurt off that blob of paint onto your model, and you don't want that. So just make sure you keep the nozzle clean. A little bit of tissue and you'll find it will clean off very easily. As you can see here, the paint goes on very well, and this is humble. Sometimes it goes on a little bit wet, as you can see here, but I just use the air just to dry it off a little bit. You can see I'm doing this one as well. I'm just drying that off a little bit more, and it won't take long to dry that. We'll get on with the rest of the bits and pieces. I'll spray the wheels and all the other bits, and I'll be back in a second. Right, these have had a couple of hours drying time now, and we can start the rest of the build now. So I'm just about to cut this off and fit it to the bottom of the hull. Again, just snip them off, sand off the little knobble and the joint line along the top where I couldn't get to before. Very easy done. Once again, we'll do a dry fit just to make sure everything fits okay. Doesn't take a long time, it's just a quick dry fit, and we can see that everything fits together nicely. It's not bowed, it's not pushing out anywhere, it's not jamming up on something, so that's fine. Now we can glue this into position. Right, now, so far I've been using my liquid cement, but I'm going to do this bit with the tube cement, and I've got a tile here that I've bought. It's used mainly for me photo etch cutting, but I also use it for glue and paint. Pop a little bit of glue on the tile or a piece of plastic, doesn't really matter. I mean, I've got this and it's easy to clean off, so we'll just get a toothpick, a nice cheap toothpick. You can get about 100 for like £1, and grab a bit of the glue on the end of the stick and just pop it into the two little holes at the end there. And then we've got some slots down here we'll also use with a bit of glue in them, and you can see I'm actually rolling the toothpick as I go along the channel. I find it spreads it right into the channel and makes the application a lot easier. Once you've got those glued up, we've got quite a bit of time, so we can pop this on where we need to put it. And whoops, having a bit of trouble here. And we're going to push those in. The pegs may be a little bit tight. If you leave the glue a little bit longer on the holes where the pegs go in, you'll find they'll slide in easier. Excuse me. As the glue will slightly melt the hole out, and if the pin isn't quite aligned up, the glue also helps to align the pin up better. So just remember to leave the glue a little bit longer before putting it on, not too long but a little bit longer, and you'll be able to pop it on there quite easily without having to push as much as you can on it to get it to close and snapping the pin off. So there we have it. The hull is now complete to the next painting stage. I'm just making sure everything's in the correct place. It's not bulging out anywhere. All those little channels have been fitted properly. Now let's just check again on the upper hull, and we can see now that it actually clips in very nicely. The back end holds the top of the hull in as well, and that's actually holding it quite a bit. So it's quite a tight fit, as you can see here. I'm pulling on with one finger and it just comes off there. It took quite a bit of pull to pull that off of there, but we now know that everything fits perfectly, and we can get on with the rest of the bits and pieces now. So we're going to put this piece on the back here, and I'm going to do that right now. While we've got the upper hull on there, so that I make sure it's in the correct position along here. So do that next, and then we'll start putting all the small pieces on top of the hull, ready for the final paint on the rest of the model. So I'll be back in a minute. Right, now we can concentrate on the top part of the hull. There's some small pieces to go on the front here. I put the machine gun armour in. I can get the machine gun in from the back end of this, so I'm going to leave that out for now, because I can then, when I'm doing the paint finish and scrubbing it and that, I won't break the gun off, which I've actually seen other people do. When I finish painting this, it will be glued to the bottom of the hull. But until then, I'm going to leave it separate. Now we've got some very small parts on here to do, and I'm just checking over what I've got on here, how I need to do it. Right, I think we're going to start with the small stuff first. So I'll see you in a minute when I've got a bit more done to this. Right, now for the annoying part of modelling. Small parts, cutting them off without them flicking all over the room so you can't find them. Best way to do it is that get a piece of plastic bag, or I'm using a glove here. I should have used when I was spraying, but I didn't. Pop the parts inside and then just lightly cut through them on the bag, and if it does flick, it flicks into the bag, so you won't lose it. Of course, unless you drop it between your two legs, and then there's a black hole there, and it just disappears totally, and you'll never find it. Now then, putting small parts on. I use a bit of white tack here, as you can see. I stick the part to it, and then get the place where you need it. Pop some glue into the hole. I like to fill the hole up with glue, especially for very small parts. And then we'll get hold of the blue tack itself with the part on there. Make sure it's around the right way, and then we can pop it into the hole using the white tack. Whoops, missed. Hang on. There we go. Hold it in there for a few seconds so the glue grabs it. Pull the blue tack, the white tack away, and it stays in there. You put your thumb on top of a very small part like that, just lightly. You can use a toothpick or the knife just to rotate it that little tiny bit. Make sure it's pointing in the right direction, especially with the round pins, because there's no register with them. And there it is, done. You can do all your small parts like that. Just make sure they dry a little bit before going on to the next small part. And there we have it. Now we have the two lights on there. I've got to put the two handrails on, which I'll do next. I'll leave that to dry for a few seconds, and then I'll get on with that. But in the meantime, we can clean these parts up. Now, as they were too small for me to hold on to, we've got to clean this mould line off across the top here. It's very noticeable. Plus we've got the couple of little spurs on the side where it was held by the tree. So what we need to do is, I usually get some liquid cement and just apply a bit over the top of the mould line. And you could do the same with the little nubs on the side as well. Let it pop on there, leave it for a bit. Make sure it starts melting the mould line. You can rub the brush over it a little bit more, and just to smooth it out a bit, to get rid of that mould line. Now they're done. I'll probably just give them another little coating, I think, and then we can leave those to dry, and there is no more mould line. It's all completely gone. So let's get on to the next part, and I'll show you what I've done. Right, the next thing to do is start painting the tyres on the wheels. Now I've cut them off so that I've only got 4 wheels on one bit of sprue. It makes it easier to get to them. I've put some paint on the tile and a little bit of thinner, and I'll just touch a bit of thinner and make the paint that little bit thinner so it's nice and runny. And we'll just touch the edge of the wheels with the paintbrush, and you should see it hit both edges. With the capillary action, it will just hold it there, and it will make a nice neat tyre for the tank. As you can see, just touching the edge, it rolls right over from edge to edge and completely covers the tyre without going into the wheel. So yeah, I'll keep going back and get a little bit more paint on there, a little bobble of paint on the end of the brush, and just pull it round. As you can see there, that is done, no trouble at all. And we'll do the same with the backs of these tyres as well, and we'll go through and do all of them together. As you can see here, we've got to do all those. I'll cut those off into fours and paint them up. Right, then that is it. We've got all the tyres painted, all the hull done, and the turret is done. Even got the bloke cut down a bit and given him the first coat of paint and a clear coat over the top so that I could do some washes on him. Now, next time we'll be painting up the tracks and the rest of the hull and the tank and all the bits and pieces, and we should be able to get it together for the final reveal in the next video. So from me and Carla, see you all soon. Keep up the modelling. Bye for now.